Hello again, this is Victor James, author of The Megacosm, and I finally watched Tom Cruise's last Mission Impossible movie, Final Reckoning. And my first thought when seeing all the characters I had grown to love, Ethan Hunt, Luther, and Benji, was, wow, they look old. And honestly, this is a good thing. I had to make sure and just did not realize that Mission Impossible is a 30-year franchise. And let me say that again, Mission Impossible movies have been coming out for the past 30 years. I remember seeing the first one in theater and loving every second of it. It was smart, visually stunning, with a tight story and great actors in their prime. But I never expected to be watching sequels well into my 40s either. So it was great seeing Ethan's team as old, because they were, and that's fine. They have been saving the world for decades, and it makes them even more heroic seeing their age on their faces to me. And after watching Final Reckoning, I'm glad Ethan's story ends here. It was not the best storyline by far, but it was a nice cherry on top for the Mission Impossible cake. Final Reckoning is a direct sequel to Dead Reckoning, which is all part of Christopher McQuarrie's Mission Impossible quadrilogy. But Christopher did something nice by going back and touching loose threads from the entire franchise. We learned in Final Reckoning that the AI, the Entity, was a mysterious rabbit's foot that Ethan stole way back in MI3. That was always an open plot hole, but with a twist because Rabbit's Foot was always called a biological agent, but instead it was the code that became the Entity, the AI that was taking over the world. And this is not the only callback we get to previous movies. Ethan finally confronts Jasper Briggs, whose real name is Jim Phelps Jr., the son of Jim Phelps from the first movie, about his father's death. They had a great interaction here where Ethan tries to bury the hatchet, but Jim refuses. Another great callback that I loved was the re-emergence of William Donlow. Now if that name isn't familiar, then Face should be, as he's a CIA agent that Ethan and his team sickened so he and Krieger could break into the Langley and steal the Nautilus from Mission Impossible 1. We learned that the CIA blamed William Donlow for the break-in and sent him to man a sonar array at St. Matthew's Island that Ethan and his team later needed information from. This was great to see because it was so unexpected, as you don't really wonder what happens to the agents who fail to stop Ethan before he's usually exonerated. Donlow even still has Krieger's knife that he found stuck in the desk when he returned in the first movie. I thought that was a great callback. And of course the stakes were high in Last Reckoning, as the Entity was taking over the launch sites of every country with nuclear capabilities. Only the UK, China, Russia, and US were left, as Ethan was sent by not only the US but by Gabriel, the antagonist from the previous film, to find the source code for the Entity to introduce a poison pill Luther had created. The visuals of Final Reckoning were striking as ever, especially in the submarine scene where Ethan must navigate it as it falls off an ocean floor cliff. Ethan was there to retrieve the Podkova device, which held the source code for the Entity. Now I'm being purposely vague because I found Final Reckoning very entertaining that created legitimate tension as you watch each country's nuclear sites fall. And only the US was left with a very difficult choice. And their choice was to either fire all the nukes at all the cities that control the nukes, and include a US city to avoid political fallout and retaliation. There really are some tense scenes as the president wrestles with the decision and makes you wonder what you would do in that situation. But with all that being said, I get why Final Reckoning wasn't a major box office hit like the previous movies. With all that I liked, the beginning was very hodgepodge, where Ethan was captured then escaped, captured then escaped. He reunites with Grace, played by the gorgeous Haley Atwell. But then he's captured and then escapes. Then he turns himself in. The movie really doesn't hit its stride until the second act, where you finally get what the story is going to be about. And this kind of makes sense as Last Reckoning is nearly 3 hours long, and I would say the first 30 to 40 minutes is just placing all the chess pieces on the board. And let's be honest, the DEI was strong in this movie. You have a black female president, a female aircraft carrier commander, a black male submarine captain aboard probably the most unprofessional subcrew I've ever seen. I mean, they look like something out of a Vogue magazine instead of actual military. And then there was this one female soldier who gave Ethan his orders from the president, and she looks so small and petite. And Tom Cruise is not a big guy, and she looks so small and petite next to him. And even yelling, you could barely hear her over the helicopter blades. But all of this was not a deal breaker for me. I didn't like Angela Bassett nor Hannah Waddingham as the aircraft carrier commander because they both felt so inauthentic in those roles. But Trammell Tillman was great as the Captain Bledsoe who navigated Soviet waters and helped Ethan get near the sub. So Final Reckoning doesn't compare to, say, Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, or Fallout, but for a last installment of a 30-year franchise, it hits the mark. Most of the characters we have grown up with in those 30 years are given heroic endings. And I mentioned their DEI efforts, but Ethan is still the main hero, who acts like a hero and is allowed to save the day, which is rare for male stars these days. Which is why so many people say that Tom Cruise is the last true Hollywood star. And to me he is. Final Reckoning was a good send-off of what might be Tom's most iconic character in Ethan Hunt. We might never see a male version this heroic, masculine, given this status ever again. And to me, well, that's a shame. So I want to remind you about my first novel, Fiasco Adventures, that's available on Amazon. It's actually available anywhere books are sold, but people like to buy from Amazon. I also have a Kindle version available we can get on Amazon for $9.99. And I want to remind you about my website, themadcosmo.com, where I actually have my shop where you could buy it from me directly at a discount. And there's also a short story I wanted to remind you about that's available for 99 cents. It's actually selling very well these days. People are liking this story, so go ahead and pick it up. Also on my website, you can read short stories for free. So these short stories, Liquid Bank, Carry On the Cleaner, and the book, these are available for free. They're all complete. Just go ahead and read them for free. And if you're interested, you can read the first chapter of Fiasco Adventures for free, just to see if it's something that you actually want to purchase. And if my website's not your thing, go ahead and go to my Substack, where you can read pretty much the same stories on my Substack. But my website, I'm actually going to be releasing a book called The Narika Meme pretty soon, and all my available information is going to be on my website. So go ahead and sign up to my website. You can get that information before anyone else. But that's all I want to say about this. God bless you and keep you. That's it, I'm done.